Joe Schott, thank you for joining the LilyList podcast. Very excited to have you as a guest. Tell me a bit about where you were born and where you grew up.
Okay. I was born in Newark, New Jersey, February 19th, 1922. My father was a policeman in Newark, New Jersey. Unfortunately, in 1930, he died from a fall from the second floor. I remember something was going on that night, middle of the night. I didn't know what was going on. I was almost 8 years old. My mother and my one sister went out to the alleyway where he had fallen to and carried him upstairs, put him in bed, which nowadays you don't hear.
Yeah.
And apparently, as I recall, he died. But the next day, I assume it was Newark City Hospital. Anyway, there were five of us children. So my mother had the five of us to take care of. My sisters told me that sometime after that, my aunts, my father's siblings, had a meeting and they were going to decide how to divide the family up. And my mother said, there's no way she's going to give her children up. So she kept us together. And my sisters also told me that my mother got some kind of a pension for 1 year. After that, she was on her own. And I don't know how in the world she did it, but she kept us together in the same house. I understand that the bank said, okay, from now on, you just pay the interest on the balance of what was owed and of the mortgage. A couple of little examples. Remember, in the wintertime, if the snow was deep, my mother would wrap newspapers around our ankles, our legs up to the knees. Then she tied them newspapers with string. Then when we got to school, which was about 6 blocks away at the grammar school, and then I would unlace my strings and put the paper boots in the closet.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then also regarding foot traffic, often my mother would cut out little sole-shaped pieces of cardboard and put them in our shoes so we'd get through a day at a time.
Yeah.
Anyway, we didn't realize it so much. I didn't as a kid. That was life. It just went along with it. We didn't have all kinds of goodies that it seems like young people have nowadays.
Yeah.
For instance, often you probably experience it. After school, the kids would flock to the local, what I would call a candy store, and they would get these Coca-Colas and bags of chips and things. That was unheard of. We never enjoyed that. If that's we never had that.
I didn't know, but you mentioned not knowing any different, and I think that was the same for me. It was just what everybody around us was the same. So it wasn't like we were going to some fancy neighborhoods or anything. It's just that was all we knew, and so that was all we did. But to your mother, keeping 5 kids back then, that she obviously had to be a strong woman. When my father died, my mother had 4 kids at the time, and all of us were 8 and under. Seeing your mother work through that and get through it and be successful with raising the kids, what did you learn from that? What do you take with you from that experience?
Well, at the time, of course, it didn't, as we spoke about, that was life. We didn't know any different. That was the way life was. If we didn't have lots of goodies, you just accepted it.
Yeah.
But my mother was strong. She could do anything. She could do plastering if she had to, or carpentry, to learn to take care of things like that. Decorating, if there was decorating in the house. Actually, by 1937, she remarried. Then our life was a lot easier. My stepfather, his name was Joseph Kelly, and they married in 37, and we had nice things then. Not going overboard with them. When he died in the 1950s, my one sister said, Joseph, he has to be in heaven. And I said, I agree with you. He just saved our family. Anyway.
No, that's cool. That's funny. Joseph Kelly. So my mother remarried sometime a few years after my father died, and she did Joseph Kelly, a good Irish name. She didn't marry an Irishman, but she did marry a firefighter from South Boston. So he might as well have been Irish at that point.
Oh, yeah. My wife's grandfather was a firefighter in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Well, for you growing up, what was, man, almost, it was crazy to say talking to you, but almost 100 years ago, not quite, you were starting school.
Yeah.
What was school like, elementary and middle school? What was it like back then? And what was your experience like going through it?
At school was, for me, I never figured I was a good student. So in most of my studies, grammar school, high school, and all I really had to put a lot of effort into it. When I was in eighth grade, grammar school, we had to tell our homeroom teacher what we decided on high school, because in Newark, you had a choice of high schools. And my mother and I talked it over and thought I would do well in what they call a technical course at Central High, Newark, New Jersey. And when I told the grammar school teacher, homeroom teacher, what I decided, she went, too bad. And I never found out what she meant by that. I think it might have been that you're going to go to high school and then you're going to go on to college, and you don't need a technical background for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was the best thing in the world I could have done. In fact, my mother went to the school to discuss my decision to go to technical school. And the principal said, my mother said to him, Joseph doesn't do well in arithmetic. And the man said, from his experience, it could be that if you don't do well in grammar school, you might do well in the mathematics of high school age. And that's exactly what happened. I was fascinated with algebra and geometry and trigonometry, and did well with the whole program of technical course in Newark.
Did you have anybody in your primary school education? Were there any people that you connected with that really shaped you with regard to where the path you ended up taking, or even how you approach the day today? Was there anybody that stands out?
No other students. I think my mother was probably a good influence on me. Someone wrote a paper about me. It was in the newspaper. And one thing that was mentioned, that my mother, she would buy me little pieces of wood, and she'd buy me little 10-cent boxes of nails and 10-cent cans of paint. She urged me to make little things, like little carved out. She got me a coping saw and carve out a dog, and it would be a doorstop, for instance. And I'd try to sell this for 25 cents. But my mother was a nice influence, and she encouraged me to study hard and all. In fact, after she married Joe Kelly, they bought me a desk, because I was in high school, and I still use that desk.
Oh, wow.
That was from 1937. But she did a lot to try to steer me. And I wouldn't say she's a great worldly cultural person. She's just down to earth, and she was a good influence on my life. In high school, I would say there were a couple of teachers that were very friendly towards me. And one was Miss Boudelier. She taught English. And again, I wasn't a great student, especially in things like English or geography, things like that. But she was a nice influence on me. And so the electricity teacher, Mr. Dady, he was excellent. He had a group of us, about 4 of us fellows, students, that were like his pets. If any class needed a movie shown about a subject, he would pick one of us to go show. That was a big deal for us, to carry the projector and all the reels and everything. And anyway, both of those teachers were a good influence on me. And that went on for years, even after high school. When I was in the Navy, I corresponded by mail with both of them. After the war, they invited me. And then eventually in 1951, when I met my wife, Nancy, 1952, they invited, it happens that on separate occasions, they invited us to dinner. So they were a nice influence on my life, and I admired them a lot.
So you mentioned your high school teachers. Was there any big challenges in primary school? You mentioned that you had to work hard with school. But
I remember the teacher would have us do I don't know whether they do it nowadays or not, but they had what they called, with a pen and paper, you did what you call push-pulls. It was just up and down motion between parallel lines, or we did ovals, and you practice that. It was probably a good idea, but it wasn't fun for me. Eventually, I got to do artwork, and that is a lot of fun. But then I didn't appreciate this push-pull business. Other classes, there was a music class. I wasn't inclined to play any instruments at all. My mother did buy me a harmonica. I think she paid 50 cents for it then. And of course, there was a little group a teacher ran where you learned how to play the harmonica. And I just couldn't do it.
Well, there's not many people.
Now, there was one teacher, that science teacher, Mr. Coleman. This is personal, but he said something that I thought was pretty awful. One day, apparently, I didn't know the answer to something in the science class, which I liked the subject. And right in front of the whole class, he said, "Beautiful but dumb." And you'd practically sue a teacher if he did that to a person. I had to accept that because you combat things then. But that just is ingrained in my memory that Mr. Coleman said.
It's funny.
My personal recollection was I tried hard, especially things like science. I liked it, the little experiments he would do and all that. But I was disappointed he took that attitude.
It's so funny the things we hang on to and remember in life. So, but so then that takes us up to, did you go to college directly after high school? You mentioned the war. And so what did post high school look like for you?
I finished high school in January 1941. I had 2 graduations a year, June and January. I was a January 41 class. Pearl Harbor hadn't happened yet, but the war work was going on. I went to Western Electric in Kearney and got a job there. But before that, I mentioned Mr. Dady, the electricity teacher. He arranged, while we were still students, he arranged for 8 of us to go to Bell Telephone Laboratories at West Street, New York, before they were heavily occupied with going to Murray Hill, New Jersey. Anyway, we went over there for part of a day, and we were interviewed by different engineers. And the one man in the vacuum tube department, he took a liking to my knowledge and myself. And he said, before we left, he said, "We'd like to hire you in the vacuum tube department, but there's no opening right now, but there will be in a few months." And he said, if you got a job with Western Electric, for instance, we could transfer you. Well, I did go to Western, and my pay there was 45 cents an hour. And then in a few months, Bell Labs did contact me, and they were going to hire me at $17 a week, and I'd stay at Western Electric. And I would never know how I would have done if I'd gone directly to Bell. An interesting thing was in that senior year of high school, Mr. Dady, the electricity teacher, we were studying the action of the vacuum tubes, amplification, detection, and all that. And I remember him almost to the word. He said, "I foresee the day when this kind of action will take place in a piece of solid material." And I figured he had been looking back, he was probably reading the literature on work going on at places like Bell Labs. And sure enough, he was right. By 1937, it did happen.
Yeah.
But that's what I wonder, if I had gone to Bell Labs, then eventually I did go to Bell Labs in 1951. And I'm thankful because it was one great place to work.
Yeah.
Anyway, after I was at Western about a year and a half, Pearl Harbor happened and everything changed. The work stayed the same, but the attitude was different. It was now war work to be considered. I had to register for the draft, and the man where I had to register, I told him that Western Electric was getting me deferments. And he said to me, "Don't believe them." He said, "You were going to win." And sure enough, the time came when I was just about ready to be drafted. I went to one Sunday morning, I went to the post office in Newark, New Jersey, and they had a recruitment office there 7 days a week. And I remember I told the man that little history, and he said, "You're in the Navy now." So I did go in the Navy, and I tried to get in a program where you would study different things, especially radio. And he said, "No, you just go to seaman." So I went through the 6 weeks of the training at Great Lakes, Illinois. There wasn't much to learn there except to march, get your meals and basic things. But after the 6 weeks at Great Lakes, they sent me to Northern Ireland to a U.S. Navy operating base. And I worked there in the Navy as a radio technician for a year and a half. Oh.
That's fine. As you might notice, I try not to interrupt too much. So usually when people are going, I let them go. But yeah, I was going to say for your Navy experience. So how long were you actually in service in the war? And then did you remain or did you move on after the war?
I was in the Navy a total of 3.5 years. When the war ended, I chose to get out. I was sent on a troop ship, late 1942. The troop ship went from Hoboken, New Jersey, to just off the coast of Scotland. We were transferred to a smaller ship that was capable of going up the River Foyle in Northern Ireland. The first troop ship was 16 days crossing the Atlantic, which was, it wasn't a fun trip at all. We had a ship, I think it was 575 feet long, and the food wasn't so great. We got, after that basic training, we went to Brooklyn Navy Yard. And then December 12th or so, 1942, we were told, a group of us were told to pack our ditty bags. That was like a little overnight volume case. Pack our ditty bags with a change of underwear, toilet articles, and we were also told to keep our mattresses, because you took your own mattress wherever you travel. And I was, the first night on the troop ship, I was assigned deck duty. I had to walk around almost overnight. And as we pulled, I wrote a story about this, so I'll quote myself. As on the dock at Hoboken, there was a man, civilian, had a little shack, a little shed, and he tended to different things that ships did when they left or came in. And he had his radio on kind of loud, and it was Bing Crosby singing White Christmas.
Okay.
As we pulled away from the dock, I could hear that music playing. So my little story that I wrote years later, I called White Christmas, partly because of that. And also during the voyage across the ocean, which was, it snowed almost every day. It was awful weather outside. And on Sunday morning, it was Christmas Day, December 25th, 42, the Mass was held. There was a priest and he held Mass. And it was even snowed then. So that part of my White Christmas.
Yeah.
4 days after that, we did arrive off the coast of Scotland, then eventually up to Londonderry, Northern Ireland, at the Naval Operating Base. And I was assigned to the radio shop.
Yeah.
We had to do with installation and maintenance of electronic equipment. And one thing they found that I was willing to do, and I think not many other guys were willing to do it, was to climb up the masts, and sometimes at the end of the yard arms, to install all kinds of electronic equipment, antennas, and run the cables all down. I'd spend half a day at a time up on the mast. Then I was there for a year and a half, and they, I think Navy regulations said that certain notices had to be presented to the seamen all over the world, I guess, if it was practical. And the notice was about joining a group called V12, the letter V12. It was a Navy officers training program.
Yeah.
It's held at many colleges in the States. So I applied and I was interviewed by the officers there. And I was sent from Londonderry, Ireland, to London, England, for interviews by different Navy brass, including dentists, doctors. And the one doctor said, a dentist, he looked at my teeth and he pointed out that right about here, there was one tooth missing. And he said, I'm sorry, but I can't approve you. So anyway, 6 months went by and the same notice was on the bulletin board. And I applied and I didn't make it. The third time I made it, because the war got serious enough they could take a sailor that had one tooth missing. They sent me back to the States, and I went to Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania in electrical engineering. And there were probably a couple of hundred of us, and we had our building where we all lived. And then we had a march to our 3 meals each day. And then after 4 semesters there, they sent me to University of Pennsylvania. It's still in electrical engineering, but they featured atomic physics. And I assumed that since the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, that the atomic age was here. So they took a bunch of us and said we would study atomic physics. But after 1 semester there, the war ended, and I was so tired of studying that I just accepted discharge. I could have stayed, but I got out. Western Electric owed me a job, so I went back to Western. And but after 3 years, I was 1949. All the work was caught up that they missed out during the war. And I was I didn't have a job anymore.
Oh,
So
yeah.
eventually, a year after that, I did finally go to Bell Labs, and that was a great move. They clearly accepted me because the particular department, the audio department, had a contract with the government regarding the Navy underwater sound work. They were a secret project that was put on to locate and identify certain foreign ships and
Yeah.
stuff. And they, after I was at Murray Hill, just a few months, our group of three of us went down to Luther Island in the Bahamas to set up the first field station for that work, underwater sound by way of hydrophones. And we had a lab on the beach. And I was there for 9 months at Eleuthera. Then the next phase was the same kind of a station in Bermuda. So they sent me to Bermuda for 3 months. But by then I was getting a little tired of being away from home, away from the States, that I went to our director and suggested that I just stay at Murray Hill. And he said, consider it done. So another fellow took my place. I was scheduled to go to Puerto Rico and all kinds of places after that. And what was super important to me was soon after that, I met Nancy Hart.
I was going to go there next, but I was wondering this long journey you've already had to this point. It sounds like you just, maybe the path wasn't always clear, but you had this path that you went down and one step after the next. Were you ever blowing off steam doing things you shouldn't have done? Or were you always, just working towards something as you went?
Well, I just did what I was supposed to do wherever I was, whether it was with the Navy or the Bell system. Nothing wild or anything. The Navy, the project was called Jezebel, which later, I think they changed it to SOSUS. So SAS, something like that. And that was important to my life, being on that project.
Yeah.
But finally, like I said, after I stayed back at Murray Hill and I met Nancy. And
how did you meet?
A good friend of mine, John Dwyer, called me up once, and he was a member of the Catholic Church in Linden, I think. He called me up once and he said the Catholic Church, St. James in Springfield, New Jersey, sent an invitation to anyone who wanted to go to a dance that St. James was sponsoring. So John asked me if I wanted to go to that, and I said, sure. So the two of us went, and I wasn't in the building a minute, and I spotted Nancy across the whole dance floor. And she told me later on that she spotted me coming in, and we met in the middle of the dance floor. And I don't remember seeing anyone else. I just tuned in on her. And I really feel like it was God's way. We were to meet, and we did. And we married the next August and had a very nice life with 5 children. And Nancy did die 7 years ago. She was perfect for me. She was great.
So what is that? So I assume at that point, are you with Bell Labs at this point when you met her, or?
Yes, I was in the audio department at Murray Hill when I met her.
What's it like? Was she working? Was she raising kids? How did that sort of part of your life look?
She was a registered nurse to Columbia Presbyterian in Manhattan, and got her degree in 1950, and got to be a nurse. So she was a grammar school teacher. And then when I met her, she was a nurse. By the time I met her, she was at Overlook Hospital in Newark as a nurse, Springfield as a nurse. And so then we got married August 1st, 1953. And the first child was born the next year in September. And before we got married, Nancy said to me, I've got a few things I want to ask you. One was, when we get married, how many children would I like to have? And I said, oh, maybe 4 or 5. And she said, that's just what I thought. So we agreed on that. When her parents had 4 children, and she was the only one still at home with the father in Springfield, New Jersey. And she was leaving him alone. And she wanted to know if he ever needed a place to live, if something happened in his life, would I be willing to take him in? And I said, yes, I would. You get married. But anyway, we had
I'm guessing that you didn't have any questions for her.
No, I was just, no matter what was going on, I accepted her. She was so great. Such a good person, smart, and a lot of, she had principles.
Yeah.
I can mention simple things, like even after we were married and had a family, you never put a mayonnaise jar on the table. And she had all these things. No, it wasn't objectionable. It was just how she felt. You never hung laundry out on a line outside on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I guess my Robert here and the other four children, I'm sure they all benefited by her great way of life.
I ask this with all respect, but my wife and I met in 1989. We got married in 2000, so we've known each other for more of our lives than less. But as great as the relationship is, there's always challenges and mistakes and learned lessons.
Yeah.
Anything, obviously don't share anything you don't want to, but any big challenges that you guys had to work through together as you went?
Oh, I like the question because I don't recall we ever had a serious argument.
Yeah.
We did have a thing once I called a spat, and we disagreed on something. And the next day, I hugged her and I said, "Do you love me?" And she said to me, "I love you, but I don't always like you." I accepted that as okay.
Yeah. You can move on now.
Yeah. So, but she was good. She was good for our kids. I'm sure they turned out to be good people.
Okay.
Came out.
So, when you said she passed 7 years ago, how old was she?
She was, I think, 3 weeks short of 90.
Okay.
She had Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
She was really on the slide the last, I would call it a few weeks, maybe a few weeks. And it was one of those things we referred to in life as it was a blessing. And I'm sure in this case it was a blessing because everything she did needed help by us.
Just had, my father-in-law died in July last year, and he had some type of dementia, might have been Alzheimer's, but he was not somebody who wanted to go to doctors or anything. The last few years were challenging, but the last 6 months were very challenging.
How old was he? What
85 when he passed.
Oh, so he had a good life. Yeah.
He did a lot of similar stuff to you. He went to Caltech and Princeton and studied a bunch of stuff and flew planes and, all that sort of stuff. So he had a full life.
Hey, Kurt, I don't want this to be lost, but Dad, tell about when Mom first became evident she had Alzheimer's and what you did for her care.
Hard, and it worked. We kept her home. We did do that, and with the help of Robert and the other children, especially my daughter Mary, she was a gigantic help. She could handle lots of things that needed attention in those days. But even at the end, we got a hospital bed brought to the house.
Yeah.
And actually, the way it worked out, I think she only slept on that a few nights. And we did put her in. What was going on was Mary, who helped a lot, she was going to California or someplace. And so let's put her in hospice for the few days, for the week or whatever. And she did go to hospice, and she died around 3 days later.
Oh, wow.
So we were geared up at home to do what we could to keep her alive, hopefully comfortable.
Yeah.
But all that had to be undone. But even in the months before that, I was putting extra railings on stairways and little barriers out on the deck so she couldn't fall off the deck. And I did lots of things to make her everyday life nice. We had to feed her. We had to do everything.
Yeah.
And we had to puree everything. The food. Does that cover most of that?
So did you have I know that you're still active, and I want to get into that, sort of what you've been doing, the last couple decades, but did you have like an official retirement from your work at, how long ago was that?
I retired from Bell Labs in 1984 with a pension and with service years of 41 years. I counted my time at Western, my time in the Navy, and also most of the time at Western, at Bell Labs. And I still get a pension. I was
going to say that they probably didn't plan on paying out a pension as many years as you worked. So.
I'm sure they didn't expect the guy to. But anyway, then while Nancy was still with us, I took up oil painting.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get into that. I just wondered that, did you take up painting?
I took up oil painting, and I remember it was different that there were, like Sundays, I would suggest to Nancy that we go to different museums, and we got interested in art.
Yeah.
And we would go to places, and there were certain kinds of artwork that I got to enjoy. And then I started to paint. And I really got into it very seriously. I was painting, like at night, I'd paint till 1 a.m. Then I'd get up and go to Bel Air. After everyone went to bed, I'd paint. And that was on for a couple of years. I entered shows all over the place, and I did well. I got some nice prizes. A little side thing, since Robert's right here, the whole family would go to an opening of a show where I might have gotten a prize, and the people were getting, like, as prizes, they would get sets of oil paints or brushes, different things. And I got an envelope with a check in it.
Oh, yeah.
Bobby bought it. He was so disappointed in Dad getting his piece of paper instead of a box. Anyway, I did well with the competitive shows. Then after a few years, I just stopped painting. And Nancy really wanted me to continue. The kids were disappointed I wasn't painting anymore. And I picked it up for, like, I would call it 3 or 4 years ago, all out painting. I paint something almost every day. I'll paint something. Originally, I loved doing realistic still lifes of old objects, horseshoes, the sides of barns, or things like that, chains hanging on hooks, or fishing gear. I'm not a fisherman, but I like painting things that had to do with that. And then so now I discovered there are other bright colors to be used in painting. And I think my paintings are a little cheerier than they were. And
Robert shared a couple, and what I liked, there was a couple that had a different twist on kind of their everyday objects. And I was going to ask, living as long as you have with the experience you've had, how do you think that informs your kind of view or your perception of things versus, say, somebody, my age, who's half your age and hasn't lived a quarter of the life that you have at this point?
It might seem odd on some of the things I choose to paint. Even looking at you now reminds me of a painting of mine. Maybe Bobby's got a copy of it. And I've thought this a few times looking at your image here. What is spectacles, glasses, heavy rim. In one on each side is an eyeball.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the eyeballs are looking at the viewer. I call it a lark. I just wanted to do that. And there was another lark, a painting I did a couple months ago. All of it is a yellow pencil hanging on a string about 4 inches long to a thumbtack on a wall. And I got more nice attention from that little painting. I couldn't believe it. My daughter Susan loved one of them, and I gave her one of those. And she wrote a note to me and said, "Dad, that pencil painting is the best Christmas present I've ever gotten in my whole life." She's 70 years old now.
Yeah.
But she loved it. And other people admired that simple little painting. So I made variations of that. For instance, one is just a pencil on a string. I think it's a string. But there's no wood. All of it is the lead with a point on one end and the eraser on the other end. And it's just a crazy thing. I've done, I did one with, instead of the lead on one end, is eraser on each end. Just fun. It's been fun. I really like to fool the eye concept in some of my paintings. I've got some that people reach out to touch, and it's just paint.
So I know Robert's got a very artistic streak within him.
Yeah.
Was there anybody in your family that was artistic, creative? Did anybody you feel like you got that from?
Well, like I said earlier, my mother, she could paint walls, she could wallpaper. She and my stepfather, Joe Kelly, in 1942, they bought a little cottage in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, within the ocean block of the beach. And the two of them, my mother and my stepfather, by masonry, they built a foundation under the house. It was just on wooden posts, the cottage. And they dug and they put a footing in. They did all the cinder block work. So I think I got some of it. And my mother would encourage me to make little things out of wood. I don't know whether Newark also had a arts high. And I don't regret that I didn't go there, but I wonder what would have happened to my life if I started out in the art field. When I got interested in doing the realistic still lifes, mostly of the old objects, the two artists I really admired from the past was John Frederick Peto, P-E-T-O. He had a studio in Island Heights, where he lived, Island Heights, New Jersey. I loved his work, and they were all of old objects in the still lifes. And the other was Michael Harnett. They painted the same kind of things. They were extremely successful. One time in the summer, I forget what year it was, we were at the Jersey Shore for the week with the family. And I knew that Pito he died in 1905, I think it was. But I knew that his studio was still there in Island Heights. So one day I said to Nancy, when the kids were all up on the beach, I said, I'm going to drive inland to Island Heights. I'm going to see if I can find Pito's house. So I went to the post office and they described how to get to Pito's house because he was locally famous. And so I went there, and his daughter, who was an elderly lady by then, I rang the doorbell. She answered. I said, I really loved his artwork. She said, come on in. So we went in and we sat down in his studio, and I looked at the walls, and here were all these objects that I knew about.
Yeah.
He had painted, and his paintbrushes were there, and his little tubes of paint or whatever he had. I felt like that was an honor to be in that environment.
That's great.
Yeah, I think they were an influence on me. If they never existed, I'm not sure of whether I might have painted the same things. I love doing American flags, but my American flags are they don't show disrespect to the flag, but they're weathered.
Yeah.
Little frayed edges and things. I thoroughly enjoy getting that effect. Or an umbrella with raindrops coming down, and it's all that's in the painting. And I happen to like it. Maybe everyone doesn't have to like that kind of painting, but I'm doing brighter colored paintings now. And
I'm curious because all of the things that you've done and what you're doing still, as you now are, you've lived more than most people will. As you go forward here, how are you?
I don't think it will be.
How are you planning out your goals and objectives at this point? What is it that you want to accomplish with the time you've still got?
I would like to accomplish that. I really enjoy it if someone sees what I'm trying to depict and they enjoy it. I have found out that everyone doesn't have to like my paintings. I remember I was at a sidewalk show in South Orange, New Jersey, many years ago, with loads of artists showing their work and lots of people walking by. And a young couple stopped at my little station, and they didn't know I was the artist, I think. But one of them said to the other, ew, I don't like these. And the other one said, neither do I. So I accept that not everyone has to like them. But that's what I would enjoy. I like it if they see, if it's a humorous painting, I like it if they witness that. I want to keep painting, and I'm thankful if I get an idea where it's successful. They're not always successful. And I'm having a great time painting. In fact, I have a feeling even if I didn't paint, I'd be thankful for the life I have. I can't believe how nice everyone has been to me. People are nice things have been happening. And I attribute some of it to Robert here.
Wow, that's good. Maybe you don't look 100, I'll tell you that.
Thank you.
But I learned very quickly playing music. I've played music most of my life and learned very quickly that I'm not going to produce things that everyone likes. So,
you know what I mean, then.
Yeah. So for you at this point, I always ask about legacy. Do you ever think about your legacy, and not from the financial standpoint, but the things you've learned, the things you've experienced, the things you've shared when, Robert and his children and their children, is there something that you'd like them to remember or learn from your experience in life?
I guess, yes. I would like it if, for instance, with my painting, like my paintings enough to want to own any of them. That would be an honor. If some of them have expressed nice things. Like Susie, there's a painting I've done where I offered one of them to Susan, my oldest child. And she said, Dad, that's not my style. And I was surprised. It happened to be one of the ones with the umbrella and the rain coming down. And she said, oh, my style. Well, I respect that. And I was glad that she could just come out and say it. One thing I feel like if I give someone a painting, whether it's my child or not, and I've given a lot of them away, you take a chance. If someone like me does a painting and you like it, doesn't mean everyone's going to like it. So I would fear that someone's going to take something and figure out.
I will say, though, any paintings your children don't want, I'll have Robert chip them down to me. So. My wife is a painter as well, so you can't see it in my office, but I've got paintings all around me here in my office. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, that's great. I think your painting is part of your legacy, and that may be part of what you do. I don't know if you've got stories about you, you've got articles, I don't know if you journal or leave notes or anything of that nature, but really, the bigger question is just, is there something you've learned that you'd like to pass down to, your children? And you may have already done it, right? So the question may not have a direct answer right now, but that's all I was getting at.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more to it as well.
Well, I guess I'm a good person. I would hope, and they are. They're good. My children are good people, and they have good interests, and nothing dishonorable that I can see.
Yeah.
I like old objects, or not even only old, but I've also done some work with woodworking. I've made a cherry hutch and a cherry corner cabinet. I would love it if Bobby and I, we discuss this once in a while. I would love it if they would want to own these things someday.
Yeah. It's funny, the objects, your focus on painting objects and then talking now about objects that connect us. I think I can see a line there with your attraction to capturing objects because there's always a story behind the object. We've got a lot of chests and things in our house that Serena's great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather made, or we have a Navy chest, an old Navy chest that was her great-grandfather's that had been out at sea. And so we still keep those things around. Some of these things are from people that we've never met, but there's a connection.
Family.
Yeah.
There's a term, sea chests.
Yeah. It's like a little wooden chest with rope handles and things. So,
yeah. Here's a little object, medium size object. It's a little.
Oh, yep.
We'll take the lid. It's now. My great grandfather, Joseph Schott, had a leather harness shop in Newark, New Jersey, Field Avenue. And this little chest was in with his things that I acquired from a distant relative some years ago. And I figured either he sold these as full size. This might have been a tradesman's sales, an example of what the big thing would look like.
Yeah.
Or otherwise, I don't know why he would have, because there's a fair amount of leather involved here. It harnesses and other kind of leather work.
We have one that looks like it's full size. Yeah.
Okay. So it might have been a sample. Now, I've given this to Robert, Bobby, and I hope he'll keep it. But anyway, I've had a strong interest for many years in genealogy regarding the family, the Schott family, and that Joseph Anton Schott came to this country in, we're presuming it was 1864, and from Germany. He went in the U.S. Army on the north side of the North. And years ago, I came across from another distant relative, many photographs and papers and things that were from his estate, including this little chest. And one thing I treasure, and I've given that to Robert also, was his Army discharge from the U.S. Army in 1865.
Yeah.
So I like it if people in the family would like some of these things like that.
All the mementos that sort of connect us. Yeah.
We did go, was it 1994? I think it was. I have two sons, Robert and Jimmy. The three of us went to Germany for the sake of researching the Schott family name. And we had the greatest time. We met people that were distant relatives, and they accepted us. It was a nice experience. I remember.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
We made the rounds, and we were accepted in many homes. It was a good experience. In fact, in one family, still with the name Schott, and no relation, though. And they invited us to stay overnight at their home in Germany.
Wow.
It was a nice experience. They enjoyed meeting these Americans.
I was going to say that's my experience, is a lot of people complain about other people, but whenever I've traveled, I've found most people to be genuine and welcoming.
Well, what I was aware of, we went over there and we would go into a town that we knew, and everybody would accept us and come in and have lunch here and let's do this and that. Now, I can't imagine that if, say, you lived camp or Newark or wherever, some guy you never met before stopping in. And I can't imagine the acceptance would be the same as we experienced in Germany. It was special.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing, and a lot of people that talk with you, and it's just a guess, I could be wrong, but ask, what is it? What are the things that you do to have a long and happy life? And I want to rephrase that a little bit because that's less interesting to me, and it's probably my personality more than anything else. But I'm curious, what are the things that you feel like you either consciously were able to avoid, or things you feel like you were lucky to avoid that's allowed you to stay positive and live a healthy life to this age?
I think a lot of it probably is, we call it genealogical,
Yeah.
your genes. Now, I'm of that pretty high age. All kiddingly tell people, and I point out that I've got 5 children and they're all senior citizens. Now, Robert's 66, Susie's the oldest, she's 70, and they all look fantastic. And so, sure, it's the genes.
Yeah.
But I happen to be of this age, and I'm still capable of, I don't want to run or do anything like that, but I'm capable of getting around on my own. I'm very cautious about going up and down steps, extremely cautious if I have to cross a street, because I'm aware that I could make a mistake and not any bad mistakes that happen. But I owe Robert here a lot of thanks for introducing me to things like this nice interview with you having with me, and I'm having with you. But other things he's looked into, and it's been successful. There's a group called Honor Flight, and there's a group of men. I think they're based down in the Southwest Nevada. Dream Flight.
Okay.
It's called, and they gladly take veterans up for rides in a World War II era biplane, open cockpit.
Yeah.
So far, Bobby's arranged for 3 flights for me. So you go up with the pilot. It takes you for a flight, and it's about 20 minutes, half-hour flight, and it's just wonderful. And they told me, my first flight was when I was 99, and when we landed, the pilot said, "I see you're going to be 100 years old," and he said, "I want you to know that when you're 100, you're entitled to a flight every year for the rest of your life." We missed 1 year, but I'm sure they're not just being special about me, but except that for my age, they take me up, and they're nice guys. They send 2 men. One does the aviating, he's the pilot, and the other is the aide to help get you in the plane safely and all that. So it's usually men. They fishing all over the country, and they own any order of 5 or 6 of these airplanes. They're steermen, they call them.
Kurt, I want to mention here, because I'm conveniently sitting next to Dad, and I know you. My name has been dropped a bunch, but I think Dad would also agree that things happen because of all my siblings, Jim, Mary, Peggy, and Susan.
Yeah. I was going to say that, I had asked it's things to avoid instead of things to do, but to me, in all of your life and everything you've told me, it sounds like you've been successful. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've really been successful for the most part, avoiding loneliness and being separated from people. It sounds like you've been really connected with people quite closely for your entire life.
Which is, all that is true. And it's a terrific surprise to me that all this is going on.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe how lucky I am and how nice everybody's been. It's unreal. Stuff keeps happening. In the last few months, there are at least 2 men who own restaurants have invited me to come.
Oh, yeah.
One man the other day, he even said to me, "I want you to come back for lunch again sometime. I'll come pick you up even." I didn't even know them before.
Yeah.
And everybody's been fabulous to me.
Yeah. Well, I think talking with you, seeing you, you've still got a good bit of journey left. So, I sincerely thank you for spending some of that journey and some of your time with me, because it's been great speaking with you. And next time I'm passing through New Jersey, I'll definitely stop in and say hello and pick up my painting from you.
Good, Kurt. And I want to point out that you've made it a nice experience. And I like the way you handle things. This is what you do, but I'll tell you how I feel. You made me feel very comfortable about this. And
Well, thank you. Yeah. I genuinely like
yeah.
talking with and learning from other people. So yeah, it makes it easy for me too.
Hey, thank you, Kurt.
You can't hang on to yourself. You don't have to try not to hang on to yourself. It can't be done. And that is salvation. The most important thing for anyone to realize is that you and every person you see will soon be dead.